Okay, now we're streaming now live on YouTube. So hello again, my name is Alicia Castillo Holley, and this is part of our series of webinars and Fireside Chat. So why are we doing this? We're doing this because I've lived in many countries in the world, and rarely did we have the opportunity to have intimate conversations with people that I thought were very interesting, and they were probably not very famous. That's why we do what we do. In today's chat, we're going to talk about mentoring. It's because I've been mentoring or receiving mentoring for over 40 years, I'm 58 now, and more and more I'm under pressure to provide mentoring. And I think the concept of mentoring has been mismanaged and is not getting the results that people need for both sides, for the person providing the mentoring and the people receiving the mentoring. So I wanted to talk to people about mentoring. Most recently, I am a mentor at the Santa Clara University Women's On Board Readiness Program. And the level of expectation is very, very high. And we go through some training, and I did my own notes about improving the way we mentor. That has been extremely useful for the people that I mentor, but I've also started to look into other ways that I can help somebody else, and I can provide some guidance about how to make the most of mentoring sessions. I'm also a mentor in a couple of organizations that support women entrepreneurs or women in business that want to grow their businesses. And we see the same problem over and over again. And the mentoring sessions, if you are not careful, it's nothing more than a waste of time. And you don't want to have the experience of wasting somebody else's time, especially if that time is valuable. So I wanted to bring this to you. We were not going to do a session in December, and I thought this was so relevant that this was a great way to end our series of Fireside Chats. Having said that, I'm going to start. I did a small PowerPoint presentation. Those of you who have seen me present know that I usually don't do PowerPoint presentations, but I thought it was very important to be able to shorten the message and be very laser focused. And the whole purpose of this talk is to move from wishy-washy, superficial interactions that don't lead to any results to having very laser focal, actionable tips and deep transformation, which is the whole goal of mentoring. And I'm going to reflect upon my experiences being mentored, which I use as a basis for today's conversation. So I've been mentored as a daughter, as an early researcher. I presented my first research paper when I was 15. So I was a very, very young researcher. As a professor, I had fantastic mentors. I did not have a mentor as an executive. I was an executive for a large corporation for 5 years. We did not have mentoring. I was mentor at my MBA. I was mentor as an entrepreneur. I was not mentor as an early angel investor or as a speaker or as an author. I have been mentor as a hotelier. I'm building a hotel, and I have fantastic mentors. I did start a large restaurant. I did not have any mentors. Nobody mentored me as a mom. You know, contrary to what most people say or do, I left my country with my kids when they were small, and I didn't have mentors as moms. We just didn't talk about it. I've been mentored as a grandmother by my first mother-in-law, who was absolutely an amazing person. I am an avid gardener. I have not been mentored as a gardener. I was mentored by my first mother-in-law, who was a fantastic person again, on how to become a great mother-in-law. I have not been mentored. I was a stepmother. Nobody mentored me on that. But most recently, people have mentored me on how to be better at networking. People throughout my life, they mentor me about what it is, how can I be a better person, a better human being, a better woman. And I receive a lot of support and mentoring now that I'm in Silicon Valley about how to be a Silicon Valley investor. Also, I did my PhD late in life at 50, and I received a lot of very good mentoring to have high quality academic papers. So mentoring, what I want to say here is that mentoring does not refer only to your professional life. It also refers to your personal life. There's so many ways that we can be mentored and we can mentor others. but there's one key aspect of mentoring. One it is that you want to be able to excel. And the other aspect is that you need to be extremely well prepared to mentor another person. For example, I'm not an artist. I cannot mentor an artist in the same way that I can mentor a scientist, because I don't have the expertise to do that. So when you are mentoring somebody, if you want to be transformational, you want to pick the topic in which you excel so you can help another person excel. That is the fundamental basics of transformational mentoring. If you can't do that, then you have what I call wishy-washy interactions, and those interactions don't really lead to a lot of results. They actually become very, very boring. So what I want to do is I want to give you the tips so you can move mentoring from boring to transformational. And that is what we want to do here. And this is how we're going to structure today's talk. We're going to start with some stories. We're going to talk about the beauty and the ugliness of mentoring. What is the difference between mentoring and coaching? And how do you move mentoring to another level, to a transformational level? When I'm going to start talking about transformational mentoring, I'm going to open up for Q&As before we start talking about that. And we're going to talk, in that particular case, we're going to talk about the 4 characteristics of transformational mentoring. What is transformation? What is inspiration? What are the analogies? And what are the expectations? Then we're also going to talk about healthy and toxic mentoring and the 4 steps to great, amazing sessions. And then we're going to have some other opportunities to ask questions. So that's the structure of today's talk. And as you will see, when you are doing mentoring, you have to have an agenda and an intention. Otherwise, it's going to be all wishy-washy. So let me tell you about some stories. These 3 stories, Capital Semilla, Silicon Valley Investor, and Hotelier, are about professional life circumstances. And the other one about being a woman or a mother-in-law or an academic are, for me, more personal. So I'm going to just share with you a couple of those stories. Probably my most relevant mentoring session happened with Capital Semilla. Capital Semilla means seed capital in Spanish. And it was a fund that I had in Chile, that I created in Chile. I created the first seed capital fund in Chile. I thought I knew what I was going to do, but to be honest, now that I'm more wise, we didn't know what we were doing. But we were able to get things done. At that time, I was also a founder of 3 other companies, and one of them was called Reclamos, and Reclamos means complaints. And it took a lot of work. For over 3 years, we worked endlessly to try to get this company off the ground. What the company did was a C2B. So it was a feedback processing system to give companies feedback from customers. So everything at that time, this is 20 years ago, everything at that time was about companies pushing things to customers. So B, business, to C, business to customers, pushing things to customers. We were, in this particular case, we wanted to give the customers a voice so they can give feedback to the companies so the companies could provide better services and products to meet the demands that people wanted. It was a complete disaster, and we lost a ton of money. But I was committed. Those of you that know me know that I'm very, very resilient. So I was committed, and I always said, failure is not an option. I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm going to keep doing this until I break the code. Now I know that sometimes it's good and wise to say, no, did my best, but I don't do magic, so it's time to move on. That was the lesson that this mentor taught me. So one evening, one Friday afternoon, one of the investors on the fund called me and said, I need to talk to you because I'm very worried that you are not getting enough rest and you're just not going to be successful with one of your companies. And I'm concerned about you because I care about you. So at 7 p.m., when we closed the office in Chile, the working schedule lasts until 7 p.m. So at 7 p.m., I came down from my work and we met. I had a cup of coffee, he had a beer. He was going home, I was going back to the office to work. And he made me think through what was the strategy of the company. And he asked me very, very important questions. And he said, what do you need to do to decide to close a company? Because I think you're going to have to close a company regardless. And you've been spending a lot of time and money on this. So he asked me the correct questions, and he drove me to actionable items. What are the things that you need to do? And that's one of the secrets of a fantastic mentoring session, is that you have homework to do. So this mentoring session does not end the mentoring, ends the time together. But if you want to do a transformation, you need to keep thinking about something that you decided to do. This mentor actually gave me, without investing in the company, he gave me the money to run the company for 6 months. He gave me $50,000. And he said, you have to promise me that if you don't make one sale, you're going to close the company. We had some ideas of the things that I needed to do. But I went back, I outlined our plan, our milestones, our key performance indicators, and I fired the CEO, I hired a new CEO, and within 2 months, I knew I had to close a company. That is great mentoring. So it was transformational. My life was different before and after that session. To the day, it's still one of the most valuable lessons I've learned. It was actionable. It gave me homework to do, but it gave me some guidelines because I didn't know, because I had never run that type of company and I had never had to close a company. And I said, well, no, I'm not a quitter. So that was a great mentoring session. Another great mentoring session that I had was when I was around 19. My best friend at the time was a very eccentric Czechish scientist. Her name was Mila Bekine. And she was really, really crazy. She had a moth as a car, and she never spoke good Spanish, so she would mix things. She would tell me, could you please stab my dogs instead of feed my dogs? Those kind of things. And she taught me some things that were really, really relevant. What she did was she gave me the tools to believe in myself, but she didn't tell me this is how you believe in yourself. What she told me was that if I wanted to discover who I was, I needed to be on my own. And she gave me a little flask with cyanide so I could feel comfortable walking in the cloud forest by myself. For those of you who've never been in the tropical forest, the forest is dangerous, but it's dangerous because you have snakes, scorpions, you have all sorts of little creatures that can really kill you. You know, you don't have lions because they're from the savannas, although we do have small lions there. But what's going to kill you is a small thing. It's probably a poisonous snake or a poisonous spider. But what I was more afraid of was to find somebody walking around alone in the forest, because as a young woman, you didn't go around walking in the forest. What she did then was she gave me this little flask, and she said, if anybody comes and tries to hurt you, you can break this and you can cut them and they would die. And that's a true story. And I'm like, okay, I'm willing to try. And then she said, don't go walking in the forest at night or in the afternoon, because the dangerous people go out in the afternoon or at night. Go very early in the morning. So the first time I did that, I went for a walk like at 4 or 5 in the morning, which is at dawn in the tropics. And I came back 2 hours later. And that built up my self-esteem. I cannot tell you how important that lesson has been in my life, professionally and personally, because what it taught me was to trust my instinct, to believe that I could sort out any difficult situation. And that is the transformation that mentoring can do for you. And when you realize that, you begin to expect more of that valuable time that you have with your mentor and the valuable time that you have to spend, because that's the most valuable asset that you have is your time. You cannot replace that. So that was really interesting. Those two transformations were very, very interesting for me. And I want you to start taking notes about what was a transformational conversation that you had with somebody who knew more than you did in a particular aspect, because that is one of the conditions of mentoring. Like we said, if there's somebody has expertise and talent and knows wisdom, and there's somebody who doesn't have that. So the process of transferring some of that and creating new knowledge together. Otherwise, you're just going to have a wishy-washy conversation that is not going to get the transformation that a good mentoring can do. The beauty of mentoring is that it creates a connection. It's a very personal and humane relationship. It's a connection that expands not only beyond the time that you are in touch. In those two cases that I mentioned, and one of them, one person passed away. That was probably 40 years ago. And in the other, I have lost touch with that mentor for probably 20 years. But it's not only a connection, it's a very deep personal connection, but it's a connection of gratitude. It's a connection of service. It's a connection of usefulness. So it's not just a connection. It's a connection that means something beyond that. That is the beauty of mentoring. But mentoring also have an ugly side. And that ugly side is that it can be toxic. It can be disempowering. And that is when you know very soon, this is not working for me. But equally dangerous is the irrelevance of mentoring. It's a time waster for you, for the other person. And if you have an irrelevant mentoring experience, it's not going to create that beautiful connection that we spoke about. And so let me take a few minutes to explain to you the case of toxic mentoring. A toxic mentoring is when the person who is supposed to give you guidance tells you something, with or without intention, tells you something that takes power away from you. Now, I don't like to use the word empowering, because I think the whole concept of empowering is disempowering. I'm not giving you power. The power is inside of you. But what I can do is I can take that power away from you, because I can make you feel bad about you, about your decisions, about your choices, about your attitude, about anything. And when I do that, I can create a lot of damage, especially if I'm in a position of having an influence in your life. When you open your brain to a mentor is supposed to give you guidance, but it's not supposed to make you feel bad about you. That is toxic mentoring. And what do you do when you have a toxic mentoring? You cut it immediately. You say, I'm sorry, I don't feel well. That's all you need to do. You cut it. Because the longer that you exist in that toxic mentoring, the worse it's going to be for you, and the harder it is going to be for you to get out of it. It is like putting hot water or a pot with water in the stove with the stove full on. So the longer you keep that with the stove on, the longer that the water is going to boil. But if you take the water away from that fire, it's going to calm down. You need to cut it as soon as possible. So you need to be in tune with your feelings when you're going through a mentoring session. And I say that because sometimes mentors don't realize that they can tell you something that is going to make you feel bad, because they're not in your head. And not every mentor is in tune with your feelings. So that's when we talk about the secret of a successful mentoring session, we're going to talk about how you make that connection first, because that's very important. But sometimes people are inconsiderate without realizing that. One of the things that I've noticed now that I'm older, that I've lived in many countries, is that the whole issue about white privilege was something I never thought about, because I'm like, I'm not privileged. What are you talking about? But the fact that I am lighter in the skin and that I have green eyes gives me certain privilege over people who are not born that way. And that is not fair. But that is something that, even though I didn't like, exists. So when I used to tell people you can do everything you want, I was actually disrespecting people, because that is not true. You cannot do everything you want, but you can always control your attitude, and you can always behave in a way that you're in control. That doesn't mean you can do everything you want. It only means that you're in control of your attitude. That is a much more respectful way to address people who have to face discrimination, whether it's gender, race, sexual orientation, I don't know, whether you're tall, you're short, whether you're fat, you're skinny. It's more humane to tell people that, because that is more respectful of their circumstances. So when you are having a mentoring session and you feel that the power that you have is slipping away and you feel bad about yourself, you need to stop it. You don't need to be rude, you don't need to run away, but you need to stop it right there. You need to say, I don't feel good, let's take a break. That is the way you are responsible for the mentoring from your side. Then you can talk about it later, but at the moment you need to cut that. That's one of the things that creates a healthy mentoring. So that is with regards to toxic mentoring. With regards to irrelevant mentoring, it's much harder because you don't realize that. But the way to evaluate if a mentoring session is being irrelevant is to measure the transformation. If you finish the session and you don't see anything that change in you, that is going to be more of a wishy-washy mentoring. And it is your responsibility, as well as the mentor responsibility, to make it more transformational. And we're going to talk about how you make it more transformational, but it goes both sides. It's just not on your side or in the mentor side. It goes both ways. So when you're talking about irrelevance, what you really are doing is you're wasting your time and the other person's time. And that is, as I mentioned, that is the most valuable asset. Bill Gates had a very, very interesting conversation the other day about who was wealthier than him. And he said, well, people who are wealthier than me is because they have more time. They have more time to spend time in whatever it is that they want to do. So he really, really nailed it, because we can leverage everything, but we cannot leverage our time. Our time is going to end, and every minute that we spend is a minute that we don't use to our benefit or to our enjoyment or to our progress. So I wanted to take a step back and make some reflections between mentoring and coaching, because I've been a coach, I've been trained as a coach, and that has helped me mentor in a better way. But mentoring and coaching are not the same. They're used interchangeable, but there's a very, very key distinction. A mentor is more of a teacher. The mentor knows, and the mentee does not know. And the purpose of mentoring is to help you avoid making mistakes. It could be said that it helps you move faster, but in reality, what mentoring does is makes you avoid mistakes, because the mentor has either learned from experience or from watching others or from studying how to avoid mistakes. In the case of coaching, a coach is a supporter. So the coach helps you find answers. The coach does not need to know. The mentor needs to know. So if we're going to talk about what are the areas where you can mentor, you have to understand that the mentor has to have expertise in the area that you're seeking mentoring. So for example, I can't mentor anybody about how to use makeup. I hardly wear makeup. I'm not talented at that. That's not my area of expertise. But I can mentor somebody about business strategy, about career development, about wealth management, about creative partnerships, about speaking, because I do that very well and I know that very well. I can coach anybody in any circumstances, because the tools that you need to coach are completely different. You're very, very focused on the other person, and in supporting the other person find answers. That is the difference between mentoring and coaching. Why is that important for you to know? Because if you're going to do transformational mentoring, you need to make sure that you pick the mentor that you require for a particular purpose. So you don't have one mentor for everything. You have a mentor matrix, and we're going to talk about that in the next minutes. And with this, I want to start talking about transformational mentoring.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time, Alicia. My name is Alicia Castillo Holley from Israel and Mexico. And I'm leading with other partners, a venture capital that is supporting entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, mainly women, on tech startups. And I wanted to ask you, in Latin America, the culture is not really of a mentoring culture. How to encourage this culture of mentorship in Latin America, especially in Mexico? And the other one is, how would you suggest to find the right matches to help our entrepreneurs to find the right mentors?
That is a great question, and thank you for asking that question, because the reason why I created this session on mentoring was that I'm asked to mentor all the time, and the quality of the mentees is very poor, and the expectations are very poor. One of the things, if the picture that I have on the invitation is me bored to death in a mentoring session. So I'm like, okay, what are we doing? So you need to find, you remember what I said, that a mentor has an expertise and is excellent at some particular point. So you need to find that. Nowadays, we're filled with people claiming to be expert in things that they're not, especially with regards to entrepreneurship and venture capital. There's a lot of consultants telling things that are not true. And there's nothing worse than bad advice. I'm in Silicon Valley. Everybody comes here to raise $1 million. You're not going to raise $1 million if you haven't done that before. It's not going to happen. Somebody in your team has had to be able to raise $1 million before, or you start raising money before. And the consultants that a lot of these entrepreneurs get, and the mentors that they get, are not professional angel investors, or are not people who have ever closed a deal. So they give you bad advice because they don't know. That's why the conversations are superficial and they're wishy-washy and they're not transformational. So the way to pick a good mentor is to select what area of expertise you want, and to make sure that they have had that experience. Remember, a mentor is not there to make you feel good. It's there to help you avoid making mistakes. That's what mentors do. I might not be able to tell you what you need to do, but I can tell you what you need to stop doing. And that's exactly what I just did. The best way to find a mentor is to find a mentor that has an expertise. So avoid getting mentors who do not have an expertise on helping or on supporting entrepreneurs. There's a lot of people now saying that, talking about being an entrepreneur. And to me, being an entrepreneur is not to start a company. To be an entrepreneur is to create wealth and to create at least another job. And a job is a full-time job with benefits, and to grow the company several times. Otherwise, you're not an entrepreneur. Anybody can start a company. That's not being an entrepreneur. So you have to be very specific about what are the skills and the talents that you need. If you're going to talk, for example, I talk about asking for a loan. I know how to deal with banks because I've done that. And I've done that successfully and unsuccessfully. I know how to do crowdfunding with success and without success. So I can talk about that. But if somebody comes and says,
for a specific,
can you come and talk to me about an IPO? No, I can't talk about an IPO because I've never done an IPO.
Would be more like a coach.
A coach asks you questions. A mentor gives you guidance. That is the difference. But yeah, that is the main difference. Yeah. So for example, in the case of Sam, in the case of academic research, my mentor was my PhD supervisor. He was the best in his field. And he was an expert in debt and gender issues in entrepreneurship, debt funding and gender issues in entrepreneurship. So I learned a lot from him, but I didn't learn a lot from him about debt and gender issues because that was not the area of my PhD. What I learned about him was how to get published. How do you have excellent research? How do you find partnerships? How do you evaluate qualitative data? And we did that through a series of conversations over and over and over again. So you have to pick the talent that you need in a mentor. What is the area? And we're going to talk about the matrix of mentoring there. There's a lot of noise. So first is a mentor has to have an expertise. So, and there was a joke when I was growing up. So the priest used to mentor couples about couples' relationship. I grew up Roman Catholic. Priests can't get married. So,
Yeah,
hey.
I get ya.
So that is not a mentor. They can give you advice, but the advice is not mentoring. So
how do you politely cut them off?
It depends if you want to keep the relationship or not, because there's some relationships that you don't have to keep. And, I can say that because I'm old. When I was younger, I didn't understand that. But
you're not old. I'm looking at you right now.
Why, sir? Look at the gray hair here. No, but the trick is to there are people that we care for in our lives.
Yeah.
There are people that I love that are not
Yeah.
mentors for me. And there are people that I love that are not going to give me the support that I need. They don't have that capacity, but I still love them because it's a great human feeling to love somebody else. And I just don't take their advice. I say thank you and move on, and that's it. And I don't have to listen to them. Sometimes I do, but I don't. The thing is, I don't put the expectations on that relationship on giving me advice that I can use, because it's not up to them; it's up to me to use it. And sometimes they have the best intentions, but okay. So let me get back to. I have another question for Uma about what do mentors gain, but I'm going to cover that. So I'm not going to answer that right now. I'm going to cover that. But I do want to focus on amazing transformational mentoring and give you some tips so you can use it to your advantage. So you can have great mentoring and you can receive great mentoring. So what is transformational mentoring? Saves time, opens door, makes you feel awesome. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Oh, this is so great. Like we just said, hey, a mentor has to know to give you good advice. If they don't know, they can't be your mentor in that particular area. So that's wow, that's great. Gives you work to do. So go back and do the work, and I will give you work. And takes you to an upper level, helps you grow. That is transformational mentoring. I'll give you an example of what a transformation is. Let me see here. I think if I have it here. Yeah. How do you do transformation? You define the problem, and this is called peeling the onion in coaching. And sometimes the problem is not what you see. What you see is the impact of the problem or the consequences of the problem. The best example of that is the fever. So when you have a kid with fever, you have to stop the fever, but stopping the fever does not stop the problem because the problem is an infection. So it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. And then you explore what would it be if you could create a new world. And that is where the guidance of the mentor is really, really important for you as a person, as a mentee, because sometimes you're looking at the front door, and you don't see that your way out is through the back door or through a window, or you don't need to leave. That is where a mentor comes very, very handy. So to do a transformation, you have to have these 4 steps. You define the problem, you peel the onion. What is really the problem? Is the problem the fever or the infection? You define the problem. You highlight the impact of the problem. I'm feeling sad. I lost my dad last year, and I feel very sad about that. And now I'm feeling better. It's going to be 2 years. But for many months, I just had this very immense sadness, and I couldn't do anything because I was feeling very sad. And it was a person who had lost somebody very dear helped me a lot manage that. She said, go to a grieving center, talk about this. You don't have to feel better. Just stay with it. She gave me a lot of good tips. She helped me avoid making the mistake of saying, okay, I'll deal with that. No, sometimes you cannot deal with that. Sometimes you have to sit with the sadness, if that is the case. Sometimes you have to, for example, I have to close on companies, and that's not good. And sometimes you just have to sulk it and sit down and cry and feel frustrated and just feel bad but you cannot feel bad about yourself. There was a mentor who helped me go through that. What is the highlight? What is the impact of the problem? Well, the impact of the problem is not that you feel sad. The impact of the problem is that you are not a nice person to be with. You don't want to be seen as a person who's sad, for example, or you don't want to be seen as a failure. That was a problem that I had. I didn't want to close Reclamos because I was managing a VC fund, and I didn't want to feel that I couldn't deal with that. It was a contradiction in my head. So I had to think about what are the consequences of the problem that I have. And then I have to explore the transformation. In this case, this guy said, what do you need to do to close the company? And I imagine at that moment, wow, closing a company is a possibility. The same thing that walking alone in the forest is a possibility. So sometimes you don't see that as a possibility. And that is where the transformation starts. You create a new world. You create a new world because it opens up to a possibility that you didn't know it existed. And then you execute. Because it's not about thinking, it's not about dreaming, it's about goals, it's about executing. And when we talk about the 4 steps of a good mentoring session, we're going to talk about homework. Because you need to say, this is what you need to do now. So you extend the impact of a mentoring session beyond the time that you spent together. So those are things that are really interesting for you about mentoring. There has to be a transformation. Otherwise, it's a wishy-washy relationship. And you might get there, but it's going to take you longer. So why do you want to take so long? Find another mentor who has more expertise that can help you get to where you want to be faster, so you can do other things. One of the key issues of transformational mentoring is inspiration. And once you find inspiration, motivation no longer does it for you. So we are all here in the world because we have a mission. And sometimes we don't know what the mission is. And sometimes we spend our whole life trying to find what our mission. But if you think that life is a gift to develop something that you don't know what it is, it just takes you to to another area, to a more spiritual area, and it allows you to overcome difficulties in a different way and to connect with people in a different way. You have a genuine care for people. When you're emotional, you're working at a level of motivation, and motivation only takes you from A to B. Inspiration creates a journey. So it's a longer approach. It's a longer term approach. One of the homeworks that I'm going to give you is to talk about what inspires you. Because once you start becoming alert to what inspires you, you are able to frame questions for your mentor in a different way. It's not what motivates you, it's what inspires you. It takes you to a different spiritual level. That's one of the tricks, one of the conditions of transformational mentoring. The other one is making analogies. So one of the things that I found that was really interesting, and this is going to blend in with Ulma's question, is that when you translate from other experiences, you grow and the other person grows. And that's, as a mentor, that's one of the most rewarding aspects of mentoring, is that I can translate from my experiences into other experiences, and I can see the impact of my learning in other areas that I didn't think they were possible. That is also called cross-fertilization. So some people call it synergies, but what I want to refer to it is that each one of us has an independent journey. So your journey is not my journey. But if I'm talking to Ali, for example, now about Israel and Mexico, I've been to Israel, I've been to Mexico, but I grew up in Venezuela. I ended up living in Australia or in Denmark. Now I live in Silicon Valley. I cannot explain the analogies between, I cannot explain the experiences of taking something from Mexico to Israel. I can't do that, but I can know, and I can explain with 100% certainty what does it mean to translate from one culture to another, because I've done it many times. If I'm doing a mentoring session with Ali, for example, if I'm doing a mentoring session with Ali about startups from Mexico to Israel, the minute I start translating from my experiences and interacting with her experiences, I learn things that I didn't know. That is one of the benefits of mentoring for the mentor. And if you can focus that learning, you become a better mentor too. But it's much more satisfactory for the mentor, because you learn and you figure out new ways of creating new worlds. That is why mentors enjoy mentoring. When you have a toxic mentor has a one-way street, and it's more about his or her ego. So they don't do it for your benefit. They do it because they want to feel important. And with that, I'm going to go to the next slide. And the next slide are the expectations that you create when you want to have transformational mentoring. And the first one is that you have a genuine interest in another person. So now we're starting to see how these things come together. So you have the inspiration, you have the talent, you have the advice, you have the willingness to support somebody else that values your advice, but it's going to also provide you with new insights. In order to do all of that, you need to want to support another person. You have to have a genuine interest in that person. And that person, the mentee, has to have a genuine interest in you. If you go through a mentoring session, or if you have mentors where there's no admiration for the mentor or no respect for the talent and expertise of the expert of the mentor, you're not gonna have good mentoring. You have to have a genuine interest in another person both ways. So the mentor wants to support the mentee, and the mentee needs to admire the mentor. But it doesn't need to admire the mentor to the extent that they're going to do exactly what they say. It has to recognize the talent and the expertise. Otherwise, it's not going to be a good mentoring. Now, the mentor gets current situations and gets connection. That's what mentors get. You learn new things and you make new connections. And the mentee gets advice and wisdom. That is the relationship that is formed between mentor and mentee. And the best way to keep a healthy mentoring relationship is to respect time. So if you have, or let me just stop this to share. So if you're having a mentoring session like I have, we usually schedule an hour, but if we're done in 20 minutes, we're done in 20 minutes. We don't have to spend the whole hour. If we need 10 more minutes, we need 10 more minutes. We finish when we feel we're done. But we respect each other's time, because this is not about my ego or the other person's ego, or the other person being afraid of telling me, I'm done. Let me just think about this. I'm done. I just want to work on this, because you give the other person homework and they usually get very excited, say, oh, I want to get down to that. And so that is how you establish that relationship. You respect each other's time. I have a couple of other things that I wanted to share with you here, and this is the signs of healthy mentoring, is that you have the impact, and that's why I mentioned that you have a mentor matrix. So you can have a mentor if you have a startup, you have a mentor for marketing, you have a mentor for presentations, you have a mentor. Here it's very common to have a mentor for pitching to angel investors. Is very different than pitching to venture capitalists. It's very different than pitching to partnerships, but you have a mentor for each one of them. It's relational. It's not transactional. You don't look for a mentor to tell you, okay, what is the recipe for this? It's more of, how do we establish a relationship between two human beings? You respect the time. You measure the rewards. How am I rewarding you? Am I giving you good advice? Are you giving me interesting thoughts? So you measure that. Otherwise, it's very difficult to to have a healthy mentoring. And what ended up happening is that people get bored, and then they, maybe they become friends, but a friend is not a mentor. And that's okay. But what you don't want is, you don't want to leave people thinking that the relationship doesn't exist, that it's superficial, and you didn't have any impact in somebody else's life. And I'm going to end with the questions after this slide. There's 4 steps to a mentoring session, that is, to a successful mentoring session. The first one is you have to set the clear expectations. What is your intention? What is your intention in this mentoring session? And I do that with, whenever I do mentoring, I do that. What is the intention of this session? We want to do A or B or C. We might not get it, but by having an intention, it makes easy for both parties to have clear expectations. And then you start with the heart. So that's the area where, how you feeling today? That's very important, because sometimes something happened, I had an accident last week, or, I feel, I don't know, I drank too much, I'm having too much coffee, or, my boyfriend or my girlfriend or my kids or whatever, or I have a cold. So you start with the heart, you start making an emotional connection, how are you feeling? But you continue with the goals that are set with the expectations. And then you have a discussion about the problem. Like I said, this is the problem, this is the impact. Let's explore new ways of doing things. And then you give homework. This is what you need to do now. And that's actually really exciting, because you usually create the homework together. I tend to say, okay, the 2 things you need to know are these 2 things. And I got that from a book that says the 1 thing you need to know. And they always say that people will only remember 2 things of a conversation. So that's 1 thing that I'm going to ask you. Okay, what are the 2 things that you got from this conversation? Let's go and write it down. When you write it down, what happens is your neurons and your hands are connected, and then you read it. So it's a visual connection, and it makes it more real to you. And I can't be with you because we're already done. I'm in with my life, but I want to extend that. Connection that we had, or that session that we had. So you always end with 1 homework. So those are the things that make a mentoring session really, really good. And I'm not going to go to all the details that makes them really, really lousy, but if you don't have clear expectations, you don't have a good mentoring session. If the other person doesn't have talent in a particular area, you don't have a good mentoring session. If you don't explore transformation, you don't have a good mentoring session. And in my experience, if you don't have homework, you don't have a good mentoring session. It just ends there, and then you forgot, oh yeah, we had a good time. Well, we can have a good time. Let's go to the beach. Let's go and have a nice coffee, or let's go to a concert. But that's not mentoring. That's just friendship, and it's good, but that's not mentoring. That's something else. If you want, you can. If you want, you can ask some other questions here. But we have some questions from our group, because there's some people that can't make it because they're in India, or they're in other parts, or they're in New York. Sam, I know you're very brave. Thank you for being here. But there's some people who are in parts of the world that it's not convenient for them, and they sent us a question before. So I want to share those questions with you, and I want to answer. So when they get the recording, they can see these. So first question is, can I find a mentor in another country? Absolutely. Now with Zoom, you can find mentors anywhere. You can find mentors anywhere. How do I ask a person to mentor me? This is a great question, because usually people start asking people that they admire for mentoring, and then the questions that they ask are too vague. So we don't have, if you have certain expertise, you just don't have enough time to mentor all the people that you wish you could. So how do you ask a person to mentor you? Is you define specifically what you need out of that mentoring, and why do you think that person is the appropriate person to mentor you? And you offer a reward. That's very important. What are the rewards? I remember telling people, I can take your kids to school, or I can walk your dog, or I can pay you, depending. But when I needed more mentoring was when I was younger, or when I did my MBA, I was very poor, and I didn't have the money to pay people, but I always offered something. I can make you cookies, or I could do something for you, or let me know, I can translate something for you, because I was good at translating things. But ask a mentor to mentor you. You need to be very specific about what is the mentoring about, why do you think that person is the appropriate person to mentor you, and what do you want to give them in return. In my particular case, I'm an angel investor. I can mentor people on angel investing and other parts of that. But when people say, well, you know, I don't know, how do I find an idea? I can't mentor you on that. That's too vague for me. Find somebody else who has other types of expertise. So you need to be very specific about that. Also, to ask a person to mentor you, you need to be open to people saying, no, I can't mentor you. And you need to be okay with that. So you can ask why, but people don't need to ask you to answer to you why. You just need to be gracious about that. What is a toxic mentor? Oh, toxic mentor is a person that makes you feel horrible about yourself. So we already talked about that. You cut it. You say, I just don't feel good. I just don't feel good. Let me just take some time off. And you don't have to give any more explanations. I pulled a Mary Poppins many times. And I'm like, well, you know, I don't feel good. And people usually respect when you say, I don't feel good. And that's it. How can I mentor someone? You can offer advice. You just need to be very careful about not being overpowering, or like Sam said, sometimes your mentoring is not welcome. But you can also ask people, have you thought about this? And that opens up the opportunity of mentoring somebody. And again, people can say no. It is fantastic to be a mentor. It's a privilege, and it's an honor to mentor people. It's really, really rewarding. You just have to be a little bit careful not to be too egotistic. How can I stop a toxic mentoring? We already covered that. You just say, I don't feel good about it. And just have an elegant way out. When people ask you, can we meet? I want to see how you're doing. And if you don't feel, just disregard the conversation and find ways to not have that conversation, especially if it makes you feel bad about yourself. And why am I not getting the results in mentoring that I need? It is because you don't have the intention right. That's the first one. You're not clear about what your intentions are with the mentoring. And the second reason is that your mentor is not able to mentor you because he or she is not an expert in the area that you need the expertise. That's why mentoring doesn't work. And you can be friends with your mentor, and you can just be friends and not have a mentor. And a mentor is not a coach either. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you today. And with this, I want to open this for any more questions or comments that you might have.
When you have a red ocean type of idea,
Mm-hmm.
and you are trying to do something completely new, it's hard to find a mentor who has exact deep knowledge
Mm-hmm.
in the area. So it's I have been trying to find a mentor from the point of view of intent.
Mm-hmm.
I know they probably have some parts of the puzzle, but I want to know if they don't have the puzzle, all the puzzle pieces, can I have a good intent? And I'm unable to gauge intent before spending too much time in a relationship.
That is a great question. Well, if you are, I assume that you're talking about red ocean versus blue ocean strategies. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So red ocean is red oceans are markets that are very competitive, where there's a lot of competition. Blue ocean is markets that nobody's seen. That's for the members of the audience that I don't understand that. If there is a lot of competition, there's a lot of experience. So you could do a mentor matrix, and you could say, I need a mentor that would help me figure out this piece of the puzzle, and another mentor that would figure out this piece of the puzzle. and then you do the cross-fertilization, and you do the analysis. That's how you can do it. If people are not going to do things, people are not going to do things the way you do, but you need to think that a mentor is going to help you avoid mistakes. That's what they're going to do.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'll give you another example. We just closed a deal. I'm so happy today. I was talking earlier. We just closed a deal, an investment deal on a company that prints living organs or cells, actually, and
Wow.
microcosms and cells. And I'm so excited because that's my area of expertise. I'm so excited. But what am I going to do? I'm going to bring an expertise on printing. Printing, HP. So that's when you start bringing, analogies from other industries.
Okay, very interesting, and congratulations.
I'm so excited. Yeah. I've been working on that for 4 months, so yeah. But we're not done. I mean, they're not going to market yet, but this is really good. But that is a type of analogies that you can make. How you translate from one industry to another, and not use one mentor, use 2 or 3 mentors too.
Yes, but what I'm finding is I am now separating, since there will be no expert in a blue ocean idea. I will have to get an expert which fits the bill for part A and B, and another mentor for B and C and D. And so I divide it up. But that just means that I have to spend time building relationships with mentor 1, mentor 2, and mentor 3. And time is a commodity which is scarce. So is there a way I can gauge intent of a mentor without going 3 hours in for each of these persons?
No, you need to understand that is a great question. That is a great question. You remember, how do I find a good mentor? You tell them, I need a mentor to help me in this particular example, that this particular thing that I need mentoring with. Could you help me with that? Could we have a mentoring session? And you need to tell them what are you giving them in return.
Very good point. Thank you for reinforcing. I need to be clear in my want.
Yeah.
So I can understand whether this is working or not. Okay.
Because what happens is if people can help you, they're going to tell you, I can't help you with that.
Mm.
And that's a good outcome for you.
Yeah, it's a time saver both ways.
And for both ways. And if you're very, very clear, then the other person can make a decision. Now, I'm a mentor in several organizations, and this is a real problem that we have, especially in women, in the case of women. Senior women are few that have been investing for a long time. They're few. And then what happens, and I think a man can be a mentor. I mean, my best mentors were men too. So, and the same thing happens with Blacks, because one of my most adored mentees is a Black guy.
Oh.
And they have a hard time. And what happens is that you get bombarded with questions that are too vague. It's like, well, how do I get funded? It's like, I can't go to the program. That's why I created the program, because I don't have time.
Right.
How can can you mentor me to where do I find investors? You have to start doing your journey and ask me to help you figure out things that are more clear, because that is too vague for me. So the more clear you are, the better you're going to get a response, and the more serious you're going to be. You're going to get a better mentor, but people are going to be going to consider you more serious and professional. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
For example, now that you mentioned this, what is too vague and what is too specific? For example, warehousing an investment while you're waiting for institutional investors to come in. For example, this is something that is happening to us right now. We have institutional investors that we went through the investment committee with, 3, but they're coming in only in the second semester of the 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an amazing opportunity now that is closing, and we need to do a warehousing. So option. So this could be like a relevant topic for a mentoring session.
Yeah, of course.
Or is this still too vague?
Well, you need to specify, for example, in your case, you need to specify the volume, the amount of money, because somebody's
Oh
going to.
yeah, I know the amount of money. It's for $500,000, for example, for an ACTA company. I know which company. I know I have everything, all the details. We just need to figure out how, because we already tried 3 options for warehousing, and they're not available on their time protocols. And we don't want to miss on this opportunity.
Okay.
So I think we're running out of resources, all the team, and we really need mentoring for this, for example.
Okay, so I think what you're referring to is how do you find creative funding to bridge negative cash flow until you reach a specific milestone in terms of time? Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
So that's how you frame the mentoring. But remember that a mentoring is not an advice; it's not transactional. So you're building a relationship with a mentor. So so you say, okay, we need mentoring in finding ways, creative ways to fund bridge circumstances. And then you start saying, okay, and then what is important to you? Is it important that are they gender-based or a specific industry? Is this creative industries? Is this software, hardware? So you need to
ag tech. For example, in this case, it's artificial intelligence and sensors for agriculture, and it's also for the conservation of the bee, which is a global impact.
So what you could do, so you have 3 or 4 industries. So you might want different mentors, but what you can do is you can put an ad or you can put a post on LinkedIn saying, we need a mentor to help us figure out how to bridge this in this industry. And you know, people might respond to you or not, but you could say, can somebody make a connection? But this is something that is really critical for the mentor, is that offer them a reward. And the reward, and this is something that doesn't work.
What kind of the reward, for example?
I don't know. You offer them a reward, because why would they do that?
Yeah.
Why would somebody? And this is something that really annoys me, because we get bombarded with requests for mentoring all the time, and I cannot mentor all the people that I would love to mentor because I don't have enough time. I can't.
Sure. But what would be, for example, for you, what is your motivation? What kind of rewards are relevant for you? Or have you seen that it's really a win-win relationship?
Well, for me, I'm an angel investor. So what is the reward for me? Opportunities to invest.
Opportunity, sure.
Opportunities, well-vetted opportunities to invest. That's one. We can offer you, I run Women Get Funded. We can offer your program we can offer to promote your program. I have Box of Life, which is a nonprofit that sends food to Venezuela because people are starving there. We can offer you donations. Yeah. So you figure out what people are, and now people are so public, you figure out what people motivations are. And then you say, hey, and we could give this to you. And this is what happens. A mentor might not say, I'm going to take your offer on that. But a mentor will feel better when you took your time to figure out what motivates me. Because that makes a difference between you asking for mentoring and I never heard of you, I don't know who you are, this is the hardest one. Never heard from you, I don't know who you are. But if I have 15 requests of mentoring, the ones that I'm going to look at are the ones that are professional.
Yeah, so you're saying once you approach someone, you really need to do your research, including to be specific enough and a reward that it's relevant to them.
Relevant to them, yeah.
Hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Now you can tell people we're going to pay you, which is something that all the mentors that I have, I pay them, all the mentors, and they don't need the money. I still pay them, and I tell them if you don't want to get paid, I'll make a donation on your name.
Okay.
And so, and yeah, so that is very respectful of their time.
Sure. And what would you suggest, like in general, or what is the time frame that for a session and for the whole process of the mentoring for a specific theme or challenge or
what has worked for me is the mentoring that I've seen is more effective for me is 4 sessions separated once a week.
Okay.
And I don't that was work for me. But you know, if somebody that I've mentored before asks me to mentor them again, I usually say yes. And sometimes it's like a matter of 15 minutes or 20 minutes because we already established a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, but that has worked for me. Now, don't go to just be very specific, because don't go to very expensive mentors with very basic questions.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And be very well prepared. So whenever I have mentoring, like I have mentoring for the women on boards, these are women whose time is very expensive as well. We have homework. We start the session with how are you feeling, because that's very important to me. How are you feeling? How's your family? Sometimes we go and have lunch together, and I know their kid's name, the husband's or not husband, or if they have kids or they don't have kids, or they're going through menopause, or their parents are old or short, or whatever, or they move countries, or whatever it is, or even their men if they have kids as well, because I don't make the distinction between mom and dad or mom and moms. So I always start, how are you doing first, and then we go into okay, let's go through the homework. But we always have a goal of the session, always, and we write it down. We're going to talk about this, so they start thinking about that, and then I build the sessions up. We're going to talk about this in this session, this and this and this, because I've done it many times, and then we are a little bit flexible, but that's how it works. That's how I found that works better.
Okay. Great. And the session is like 50 minutes for the first time. It's like 50 minutes or 1 hour.
The session's usually the first session is usually 1 hour. What usually happens with me is the first session is 1 hour. The second session is an hour and a half or 2 hours, because we go and have lunch or we have coffee.
Okay.
And then we structure how we're going to work. And then the third and fourth or fifth session are usually less than half an hour. But we always start with how you're feeling. So we set the emotions right. And sometimes we can't do that, because sometimes something happens. Somebody had an accident, or, you know, I have a promotion, or I have to work on this. And then we cancel that, because there is no point in having a conversation if you're stressed about something else that is going on in your life. Mm-hmm. You're not focused on that. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of my time. I don't want to do that. And you don't want to do that either. But what happens is once you start, it's like the food, or like coffee, or it's like anything. Once you see excellence, you demand excellence. And that's how we progress as individuals, and how we lift the society for everybody. Is don't take anything that is mediocre. It's not worth it.
And I have another question. What do you think about mentoring through video in other countries, in a country that is not the one you're based at?
I don't have any problem mentoring in other countries, because I lived in 9 and I visited over 100. I don't have any problems mentoring in other countries, but I know enough to know that there's some cultural issues. So for example, I'm getting involved with a group that is mentoring women. It's a fantastic idea, actually. It's mentoring South Asian women, and they are formed initially from India. That's where the group is from. And I do a lot of deals with India, and I love India, and I've been there several times. I just love it. And, you know, we sat down, a friend of mine asked me to mentor the founder. So we sat down, and in an hour and a half, we organized her whole milestone planning for the next 5 years. We just did it, bam, 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 bam. And it was so funny because we sat down and she explained that to me. I said, oh my gosh, I get it. Because only a woman that has been grown up thinking about understanding when it is an arranged marriage without being upset about that, understanding the food is completely different, understanding the respect and love for your elders. And it's like, I totally get it. You know, I don't know the details of the culture, but I get the foundation. I totally get it. The same thing that I was in Saudi Arabia for 2.5 months. I totally get it. Or when I was in Israel, I love Israelis because they're straightforward. So I'm in Israel trying to raise funds for the fund, and this guy tells me, it's like 22 years ago. The guy tells me, well, you know, the market is like the target, and your business is like the missile. So you have to shoot it at the market. I was laughing. I said, only an Israeli can understand that. I was just laughing at that. And, you know, it's one of those things that you've been in the world long enough, or you've been exposed to cultural changes long enough to be able to say, hey, you know, this could work and this could work. And have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And it doesn't discount the people who have not traveled. It just gives you a different perspective. In the same way that diversity is good. So, you know, not only, you know, if I had not had the relationship that I have with Justin, and I was his first investor, I could have never understand what it is to be an African American in the U.S. Because I'm not, so I can't understand that. And it's just you know, you're a target. You can get killed.
Yeah, one of the interests of our fund is exactly this diversity, the gender lens, and bridging this cultural gap, because we see that Israeli entrepreneurs are very bold, but sometimes for the emerging markets, they're too bold. So they have this cultural challenges of entering markets. And on the other hand, Latin American entrepreneurs are very shy in their mindset. So we're helping them.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Latin American, because Argentinians are not shy and Venezuelans are not.
It's true. It's less than Argentinians and Chileans are much more bold, are bolder than the Mexicans, for example, or Guatemalans. So
yeah, it's a cultural thing. It's like, you know, it's like Koreans are different than people from Taiwan. And, you know, Vietnam and Cambodia are very different too. So, and Australians are very different to British, and Australian and New Zealanders are completely different. So, it's just to embed that in the culture is important. Now, I am a firm believer, and I'm gonna say, let me say goodbye to close the recording, and then we can stay another 15 minutes. If you want to, but let me just say goodbye to close the recording, because we're going over time and I'm very respectful of people's time. So thank you so much for watching this. It's been an absolute pleasure. I am delighted to be able to share with you 40 years of mentoring experience, both ends, and this is very egotistic for me, but I hope, and I truly hope you got a lot out of it, and do not settle for mediocre mentoring. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. It doesn't do you or the mentor any good. So thank you so much for watching.